Good afternoon, everybody. It's the Vikings game's still going. I think it's still at the 2-minute break. I watched the game on Hulu, so I'm always like 20 minutes behind anyway. So I just figured I would hop in with the time that's remaining and talk about the game a little bit. Let me know if you have any questions. You can type or chat a question if you would like. I am Joe Johnson, owner of PurplePTSD.com, VikingsTerritory.com, and PurpleTerritoryRadio.com. Here with the last post-game show that'll be like this. The ones moving forward will be between Kirby O'Connor and I. Kirby is the managing editor of PurplePTSD.com and the host of About the Labor. I also host Morning Joes. Both of those shows can be found on the Big Heads Media Network and on every podcast platform you're looking for. Wow, what a great win. I am so actually happy. I always joke that I'm never happy when the Vikings win. I'm only relieved. And I am relieved, but I'm also very, very excited and I dare say optimistic. I dropped the frustrated from that optimistic I've been saying lately. I'm frustratedly optimistic this week anyway, because that's a good place to start. A couple weeks ago, the Vikings-Bears game happened, and it was a debacle. You had all the subsequent comments from Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, the will they, won't they trade him, blah, 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 going into a Giants game that I dubbed the most important Week 5 game in Vikings history, at least in my lifetime. And while that was kind of a joke, me alluding to all of the just increasingly hyperbolic language surrounding that game, it was an incredibly important game. And to prove that point, you could essentially say, had the Vikings lost that game, that this week would have been an unmitigated nightmare. They would have been 2-3. They would have lost to a Giants team without Saquon Barkley. Diggs would have potentially ramped up his increasingly vocal requests or thoughts about being traded. So the fact that they won means that didn't happen. So you have to give that part of it some credence when you're talking about how important last week's win was. But it was against a bad team, maybe a team that's on the right path, but it's still nowhere near being even decent. Outside of the wrinkle of having Pat Shurmur be there, so maybe he knew a little bit more about what Zimmer does than most coaches. But outside of that, that's a game you should win. Now, the frustrating part about Cousins' career, maybe in general, but especially when he's been with the Vikings, is that he's beat teams the Vikings should have beaten. Everyone knows his record against 500 teams. We don't need to get into that. 500 or better, rather. Or against teams with winning records, especially. And so, we got to, but so I don't want to diminish what Cousins did last week, because I think there was an incredible amount of pressure on him for that kind of game. He had to perform well, not just for people like me or the fans. I am a fan also, but people in the media, if I can call myself that. But for his teammates, obviously Diggs wasn't happy, Thielen wasn't happy, just a lot of pressure all around. And so he had a great performance. Now, I have been saying that the schedule gods have smiled on the Vikings, because building off that Giants win, the best scenario you can find yourself in is against a good, not great Eagles team with a banged up and bad secondary, to build on your confidence and to say, okay, well, they have a great rush D, so maybe it goes on Kurt's shoulders more, and he can build on that confidence and say, hey, they're a 3-2 team, I beat them. So on and so forth. Now, I don't think it's as simple as most people might surmise from what I just said, or what other people are saying, that all of a sudden Cousins just turns into a completely different guy solely based on the quality of the opponent. I do think that has something to do with it. I definitely do. I do think he succumbs to pressure. He's not great in national games, so on and so forth. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, because everything's more complicated than that. And so I think that despite the fact that they're, over 20 games into this Kirk Cousins situation, or tenure situation sounds so bad, they're still kind of finding what works with him, especially with this with all options on the table. Last year there wasn't a run game, so you couldn't really. It's like when I went to treatment and they ask you all these questions designed to determine whether or not you have certain mental disorders, and they were basically like, we can't really tell you anything because you've been basically a problem drinker amongst other things for the better part of a decade. So we don't know if it's based on the fact that you're just a bad drunk or if you're actually like kind of a dick. So I bring that up because you don't know with Cousins last year if he's a bad quarterback or it's because of the pressure or it's because of the lack of help at the run game, so on and so forth. So this year there's more active components, so I think you can tell a little bit more as a team what works for Cousins and what doesn't in a perfect scenario. And I think they've learned that, clearly play action is his jam. Again, you couldn't do that last year because there was no run game, so you can't sell a play action when the other teams are like, yeah, well, go ahead and run it. It doesn't matter. You see that he actually, despite his reputation as a guy who's not good at evading pressure, which is different, I know. He is good when, or a guy who's statuesque. He plays better when he's running. Maybe that for a guy who, even as a supporter of his, I know that he can get stuck between his ears. Maybe he's a little too well prepared. Maybe running kind of gets him out of his own head because he's thinking about doing more than one thing at once, or it's just calming or distracting or whatever. Play action, rollouts, bootlegs, all that is great. But all of that, all having been said, as I said before, I don't think it's as cut and dry as him just not panicking against a team that's 4-2 versus a team that's 3-3. There's a lot of components to it, but we can see that he can make a lot of every throw. Basically, I was going to say a lot of the throws needed. He, outside of overthrowing Diggs on what would have been the third touchdown at the time, fourth touchdown of the day. He shows that he can make really beautiful throws. I always go back to that touchdown that Thielen had against Green Bay to start the season last year. It was like a hair. Any other way it wouldn't have worked. It was just so beautiful. He can make throws while the receiver's in stride. He can do a lot of that. That's what makes it so frustrating when he doesn't do it. And I don't want to harken back to that, but also the way my brain works is that when they win games like this, I get happy or relieved, and then I will be like, well, then they should have won that Bears game. They should have won that Packers game. This team could be 6-0. I argue they should be 6-0, but if they're going to be 4-2, as much as the Bears worry me later in the season because Hicks will be back, and as much as it would have been amazing to beat the Packers and take some wind out of that sail, do it in Lambeau, I feel like the Vikings lost both of those games, and Trubisky's going to be back as well. So the Bears game, not so much, but I don't think, I'm sure they do because they're Packers fans and we're the Vikings, and also they don't have like the ability to reason. I'm sure they're happy with it, but I wouldn't be. I would know in the back of my mind that, man, the Vikings defense just was asleep in the first quarter to start the game. They completely shut us down, shut Aaron Rodgers down after that, and they should have won that game. Yeah, they very well could be 6-0. I think that they're the Vikings. They are a very good team. And Cousins it's going to really go as far as Cousins can take them, but I'm getting more and more back on the Cousins bandwagon, and I was one of the main people driving that bandwagon before he got here, because when I made those arguments, I thought they would draft more interior linemen with Berger being gone. I know they didn't know Easton was going to be gone at the time, but I'm not making like an excuse for last season or anything, but I did say a couple weeks ago I was off the bandwagon after that Bears game. It wasn't a functioning offense. It just was bad. I know there was a lot more pressure. I know the run game was gone, but it was just ugh. I didn't want to seem like I was defending Cousins because I was too stubborn. Because if you're gonna try to make a career out of doing Vikings media, you're gonna be wrong more often than you're right, especially if you're optimistic. And I'm not even saying that to be bitchy. And so you have to admit when you're wrong. I'm not Stephen A. Smith. I'm not gonna keep contorting and saying, well, Cousins, but last season he started well. He's got gun shy, because who wouldn't? There's validity to what I just said, but I also understand when he's not playing well, and that the Bears game was objectively bad. Um, I'm not gonna, and they're like everything I've been saying. It's things are more complicated than that. You can be bad, and it can be other people's fault too, but you're still playing bad. It's not just Cousins is bad, and then I should deny that there was a lot of pressure, because then the pressure can be blamed. It doesn't work that way, and so I just am very cautiously optimistic about this team's chances, and in terms of Cousins and in general. I think the defense is playing amazingly. I think that they did kind of have that one drive, and I'm not going to be nitpicky and say, well, that drive, they were kind of asleep on that drive, it felt like. But outside of that, I mean, to hold them after that Diggs, I said this at halftime, and I had missed the fake field goal, because again, my Hulu's behind, so I wanted to get on while most people were at halftime. So I just was watching it on my screen, like the little box score, and so I thought they had held him on 4th and 4. I didn't know it was a fake field goal. But outside of that, I basically had said that this Vikings defense has shown a lot of resilience this year. The Giants game, they had Dalvin Cook had that fumble that could have been a momentum-changing thing. I mean, the first half was a little more competitive than I think people are talking about that Giants game, score-wise. Anyway, then there was the extra set of the new set of downs on 1st and goal after Linval hit the center during a field goal, and they ended up pushing him back for a harder field goal. I mean, you look at that. You look at another momentum changing possibly event in this game before halftime, which was the Diggs, the interception that bounced off of Diggs' hands and face mask. That was huge, and not letting them get back into this game. And I'm excited to see that resilience kind of spread to the offense as well. I do think a large part of that is calling more aggressive plays on offense. My fear during the halftime show was that they might get complacent, run the ball more, even though that wasn't working in the first half. I shout out to my man Alexander Madison for his second half. And it kind of felt like that was going to be the case. I mean, the Eagles got it close, and then the offense just kept firing. I mean, it was just great to see them put up as many points as they did in general, but especially after it felt like they took their foot off the throat for maybe a second. The Eagles got back into it, and they said, nope, we're the better team. We're playing better today. Let's just keep doing what worked early, and we'll put up some more points. And they did that. The Eagles, again, aren't a great team, but they are a good team. And I think it was incredibly important for them to get this win because of that, to build off the Giants and not say, okay, well, our record's just going to be determined on who's above 500 and who isn't, and throw a win and loss on each of those respectively, and then you'll get what the Vikings will be this season. That's just great. I'm really, really happy with that. I'm also kind of turn a positive out of it, if you want to call it a negative. They didn't get a ton of pressure on Carson Wentz. He's just a big dude. He's hard to get down to. And so I love the defensive play calling, but also the fact that they were able to win without, just racking up tons and tons of sacks. Again, this defense has had a reputation of starting slow in games or in seasons, or not showing up in big games. And while this, may not be the definition of a huge game, it was big for a lot of different reasons. And I'm just really glad with the way that the defense started, especially compared to how they started last year. I do think that Zimmer's letting them play more and rely on their natural talent. I mean, there's no defense in the league that position by position has the consistent amount of talent that this Vikings defense has. They also have a ton of time together. They're all still in their athletic primes for the most part. and they can win in different ways. They can dominate and get a ton of pressures and sacks against the opposing quarterback, or they can get basic coverage sacks. It's really encouraging. I'm extremely happy right now about where this team is at, and the way again my brain works is that just pisses me off about the Packers game more so than the Bears game. Even though going into Soldier Field, and if you would have told me or anybody ahead of time that Trubisky was going to last one drive, I would have been like, all right, we're gonna get a win. We're gonna go into the Giants. Woo! Nope. It's frustrating, but it is what it is. That's what makes football fun. Anyway, it's a huge game next week. It'll be great to not go 0-3 in the division. The Lions always give Zimmer and company fits. So hopefully they will have something special for Stafford and company, because they're looking a lot better than anyone thought they would. And big game for them tomorrow night too. I'm excited to watch the Packers-Lions this week as well. So like I said, this is the last smoke break. We'll be back maybe Wednesday, but definitely game day to unleash our new show. Me and Kirby O'Connor bringing it to you hard. Smash that subscribe and punch your grandma, or I don't know what the teens say to close these. But I've had a great time doing this solo, and I'm looking forward to doing it with Kirby because he and I are pals. And hopefully we'll get a way for you guys to actually call in and ask questions as opposed to just reading the ones that are typed. I think that's fun. And we're going to be running a special for the 99th caller that calls me fat will get a free pizza and an early grave. Was that tough? Was that cool? Cool? All right. Great week, though, guys. Stay tuned to Purple PTSD, VikingsTerritory.com, PurplePTSD.com, and VikingsTerritory.com. They're two different things. All week for coverage, Joe Oberle has his post game. He and I will be doing morning shows on Tuesday morning. I love how I'm like giving the schedule like someone's out there taking notes. Like, oh, Joe will be back. Like, nobody cares. Yay, 4-2 though. It's good stuff. Skull. And Keith, you came back, man. I thank you. I clearly need friends. Yeah, I'm happy. Play calling was great. I agree with you. All right. I hope you check out the new show too, Keith. Thanks, man.